In this video, we're going to look at one of the most clinically important but often missed psychological presentations. The person who looks fine. The person who functions, who smiles, who turns up to work, replies to messages, meets deadlines, supports everyone else, and says almost automatically, "I'm okay." But underneath that polished surface, there may be exhaustion, shame, rage, loneliness, dissociation, compulsive achievement, depression, or a personality structure built around never needing too much. And I'm going to take a different approach in this video because I'm not going to reduce this to high-functioning depression or masking as a social media label. We're going to ask a deeper question. What kind of brain and mind has to look fine in order to survive? I'm Dr. Sanil Rege, consultant psychiatrist and educator. And in clinical practice, one of the most important skills is not simply listening to what a person says. It is learning to notice the gap between presentation and internal reality. Because psychiatry often begins in that gap. A person may look composed, but their nervous system may be in threat mode. They may be productive, but internally driven by fear. They may be kind, agreeable, and helpful, but underneath that may be resentment, depletion, or a terror of disappointing others. So the framework for this video is simple. We'll be looking at looking fine across 4 layers. First, the biological layer, the stress system, sleep, and arousal. Second, the psychological layer, the concepts of masking, emotional suppression, shame, and perfectionism. Third, the personality and psychodynamic layer, where some people organize their entire self around being acceptable, useful, low maintenance, or invulnerable. And fourth, the clinical approach, what actually helps without turning this into simplistic advice like just open up or be yourself. Because for some people, looking fine was about protection. The first concept to recognize is that looking fine is often not the same as being psychologically well. Looking fine is often confused with wellness. Clinically, these are not the same thing. A person can function because they're healthy, sure, but a person can also function because they're frightened. They can function because they cannot afford to collapse. They can function because their identity depends on competence. They can function because the only way to meet their needs is to stay driven. They can function because stopping would bring them into contact with feelings they've spent years running from. From a mechanistic point of view, this is where the stress system matters. You see, when the brain detects threat, and I don't mean just physical threat, but social threat, rejection, failure, criticism, or abandonment, the body shifts into survival physiology. The sympathetic nervous system is activated, cortisol's released, it mobilizes energy, the amygdala becomes heightened and more vigilant. The prefrontal cortex may still perform, but it's now performing under load. This is a person who can give the presentation, run the meeting, manage the family, but still feel internally unsafe. Why does this matter clinically? Because many high-functioning individuals are missed. Their distress does not share the same language as others. Their distress does not always appear as obvious breakdown. It may appear as irritability or competence, insomnia, decision fatigue, jaw tension, compulsive planning, constant sense of being behind. Recognizing these signs is important for clinicians, patients, and families alike. On the one hand, while it's important to recognize it, on the other hand, it's also important not to pathologize competence. Differentiating the two is not easy. What's important to recognize is when competence or functioning becomes rigid, costly, and emotionally disconnected, it's no longer adaptive. This takes us to the concept of masking. Masking is often discussed in ADHD and autism, but the concept is much broader. I've covered it in more detail in the video here. Masking means modifying what is shown externally to reduce social risk. It's a mask to hide confusion, sadness, anger, need, the intensity of the inner world. It serves a function, because at some point the brain learned that showing the true self can result in problems. In autism, masking may involve consciously imitating social cues, suppressing stimming, forcing eye contact, or rehearsing social scripts. In ADHD, masking may involve hiding disorganization, compensating through urgency, over-preparing, or turning anxiety into productivity. In depression, it may involve the performance of normality. In personality development, particularly in children, adolescents, and young adults, masking can become so habitual that the person no longer knows where the mask ends and where the self begins. So the brain is constantly asking, what happens if I show this part of me? If the predicted answer is rejection, criticism, humiliation, conflict, or abandonment, the person learns that taking the mask off is dangerous. So the brain becomes an expert at social camouflage. But the cost is high because masking consumes energy. It increases self-monitoring. It increases monitoring of the environment. It reduces spontaneity. And it creates a painful internal split. A conditional world. The world relates to the version of me when I perform. It's not interested in knowing the person I truly am. You see, in clinical practice, this matters because masked distress often presents late. Individuals don't present when things are going okay because the mask is still serving a function. By the time the person seeks help, the system's exhausted. They can no longer keep the mask on, or the mask has been forced off. That's when they say, I don't know who I am anymore. I feel fake. I'm tired of being the reliable one. I don't even know what I feel. Here, clinicians or families or patients may fall into the trap of searching for labels. Maybe I'm autistic, or maybe I've got ADHD. But this is a simplistic approach. What we have to recognize is that the mask was formed for a reason. It may have helped them survive a critical parent, an unpredictable home, a workplace that rewarded perfection and punished vulnerability. So the clinical question is not why are you masking, but what did the mask protect you from? So for many individuals, looking fine is a core part of the mask. So for some individuals, what began as a behavior now becomes part of personality structure. By personality structure, I do not simply mean personality disorder. I mean the organized pattern by which a person maintains self-worth, regulates emotion, manages attachment, and protects oneself against threat. One person may become the achiever, another the rescuer, another the appeaser, the pleasing child, another the emotionally detached intellectual, another the funny one. These roles are not random. These roles become solutions. If being successful brought approval, achievement becomes safety. If being quiet prevented conflict, invisibility becomes safety. If caring for others met the need for attachment, self-sacrifice becomes safety. This is why looking fine can be dangerous, because the person may not experience their suffering as suffering. They experience it as identity. I don't like burdening people. I've always been the strong one. I'm better when I'm busy. It's okay to function like that until it's not. Because the real issue is this: if someone has spent their life looking fine, what happens when they finally stop being able to perform? Often they do not simply feel sad, they feel exposed. And exposure can feel like danger. This brings us to a useful psychoanalytic idea from Didier Anzeux, the skin ego. Anzeux proposed that the skin is not only a physical boundary, it also becomes a psychological model for the self. In early development, the infant experiences being held, touched, soothed, contained, and protected. Through this, the child gradually develops a sense of psychic boundary. This is me, that is not me. My feelings can be held. My internal world has a container. Now, why does this matter for the person who looks fine? Because if the early emotional environment was intrusive or critical, inconsistent, neglectful, or unpredictable, the person may not develop a secure internal sense of containment. So they create an external skin, a social skin, a performance skin, a competent skin, a nothing bothers me skin. This external presentation becomes the boundary that protects the vulnerable self underneath. The caution, of course, with these psychoanalytic concepts is that they should not be used loosely. Not every polished person has a fragile skin ego. But it's helpful as a metaphor. It helps us understand why appearance, control, and emotional containment can become deeply linked. It's not uncommon for patients to say, "I feel contained within." Now let's connect psychodynamics back to biology. Here I want to touch on the biological cost of emotional suppression. Emotional suppression doesn't just have a psychological cost, it also has a physiological cost. Because emotions are signals of needs. Just like pain is an emotion, hunger is an emotion, and thirst is an emotion. Not meeting these needs has a physiological cost. When emotions are repeatedly inhibited, the body may continue to carry the arousal even when the person's face looks calm. And this heightened arousal might be managed through the prefrontal cortex, which may suppress expression. But the limbic system is still heightened. The autonomic nervous system may remain activated. The consequence is that the prefrontal cortex gradually weakens. Sleep may become fragmented. Inflammatory, metabolic, and opioidergic systems may be affected through chronic arousal. The person becomes disconnected from the ability to sense internal bodily states. This is known as interoceptive dysfunction. So they may not notice sadness until it becomes exhaustion. They may not notice fear until it becomes insomnia. They may not notice overwhelm until it becomes burnout. So individuals who may not have an emotional language end up having a body language. Migraine, reflux, tension, headaches, fatigue, palpitations, and lots more. The body may develop behaviors to regulate states that have not yet been named. So how do we approach this clinically? We take a biopsychosocial approach. First, the biological layer. Assess sleep, circadian rhythm, substance use, alcohol, stimulants, thyroid function, iron, B12, pain, medications, medical contributors. We then look at the psychiatric aspects, anxiety, depression, ADHD, trauma symptoms, OCD, etc. And finally, risk. The key principle is that what we might be seeing in front of us might be deceptive. There might be other causes underneath, and the behavior is a form of protection. Number two, the psychological layer. Here, the basic principle is to help the person build emotional vocabulary, such as, what am I feeling? What is the need underneath? What am I afraid would happen if I showed this? What behavior do I use to avoid this feeling? This is where therapy can help. Different approaches can be used: CBT, schema therapy, psychodynamic psychotherapy, trauma-focused work, which may be needed when the mask protects unprocessed threat memories. Third, the social layer. The person needs relationships where the self is accepted and tolerated unconditionally. The ability for the person to share their vulnerable self, the self that was often avoided. The ability to say, "I'm more tired than I look. I just need you to understand. I find it hard to ask for help. I'd like you to listen to me." Fourth, the behavioral layer. The principle here is to reduce compulsive overfunctioning. But this doesn't happen by simply telling the person to reduce it. Here are emotional regulation strategies to tolerate emotional distress or tolerate boredom. Change predictions where not being active or resting is equated to being lazy. Reducing reliance on substitute objects to regulate alcohol, food, scrolling, work, status, etc. Now, before I summarize this video, a few cautions. First, not all masking is pathological. In professional life, social roles matter. We all use a mask. The issue is not about using a mask. The issue is being unable to take it off. Second, when we're wanting the individual to share vulnerability, this must be done slowly, should be paced. Because for some people, sudden emotional exposure can be destabilizing. Trust is built slowly. Third, in clinical practice, clinicians should watch countertransference, our own feelings in the context of the doctor-patient relationship. The patient who looks fine can make the clinician feel reassured too quickly. They're articulate, insightful, they're functioning, they're saying all the right things, and this can create a sense of complacency. A person can describe their trauma fluently, but may be disconnected from it. For clinicians who want to explore psychodynamic psychotherapy in more detail, please check out our 3.5-hour course here. Fourth, risk assessment is really important. Some of the highest risk patients are those who have decided not to burden anyone. They may appear calm because they've already withdrawn internally. They may say they're fine, but look for evidence that shows otherwise. Speak to their family members. So if there's one thing to take from this video, it's this. The person who looks fine may not be pretending. They may be protecting. And the clinical question is not simply, are they functioning? The more relevant question is, what is the cost of that function? And what part of the self has been left unseen in order to maintain it? I'm Dr. Sanil Rege and you're watching the Dr. Rege channel. If you found this video helpful, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. And consider supporting the channel through the membership. Members get early access to videos and priority replies to your comments. And if you're a clinician or mental health professional interested in this deeper style of thinking, linking symptoms, personality structure, neurobiology, psychodynamics, and clinical formulation, we explore these ideas in a lot more depth on the Academy by Psych scene. Because in psychiatry, the visible presentation is only the beginning. The real work often starts with what the person has learned not to show. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, stay curious. Bye-bye.